Fox Business Alert.
More stress for the already stressed out mortgage industry.
Wall Street firms have been hit with subpoenas. 3 subpoenas for 3 firms as investigators look for information related to the selling of debt tied to high-risk mortgages. Our Connell McShane has been following this story. He joins us now with the very latest. You've been calling Bear Stearns,
right.
Merrill Lynch, Deutsche Bank. The 3 names have been subpoenaed for more information by the governor, the Attorney General.
The Attorney General of New York. There's no comment coming out of the firms. The Attorney General's office isn't returning calls today either, so the news conference about this won't come today. That's not to say it won't come some other day, but the details of it came in the Wall Street Journal this morning. I'm talking to lawyers about it. They say it's going to be a very lengthy legal process. I can actually run through some of that for us here with the Wall Street Journal saying that the subpoenas have been handed out. The firms involved, Merrill Lynch, Bear Stearns, Deutsche Bank. The questions Andy Cuomo's asking here, wants to get to the bottom of, include the following. How did these firms review the quality of the mortgages they repackaged and eventually resold? How was the mortgage debt pooled into other securities, these CDOs and SIVs we've been talking so much about? What's the relationship between the banks and the rating agencies, S&P, Moody's? What's the relationship between those guys been throughout this whole process? And again, it's all part of a wider investigation. Cuomo's been looking at mortgages for a while, already subpoenaed Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac surrounding a different case surrounding mortgages. And again, as Liz says, we've been calling around to just about everybody to try to get comments. But what we have here is a New York State Attorney General, just to kind of sum it up, a New York State Attorney General going after Wall Street again. The predecessor, Eliot Spitzer, as we've talked about, did the same in the analyst scandal a few years ago over conflicts of interest. This is a completely different situation involving mortgages and a new AG.
Connell McShane, thanks very much.
Okay.
So what's ahead for these Wall Street firms?
Joining us now to talk about this, a man who's got lots of experience with such cases, former SEC enforcement attorney Ron Geffner, who's now a partner with Sadis and Goldberg. Ron, first of all, be specific. What laws might have been broken?
Securities laws related to adequate disclosure, securities laws related to suitability.
Meaning what? When you say related to suitability, what does that mean?
Well, first you want to make sure if the concern is whether these investment banks did the proper analysis of the securities that they were packaging, is who are you selling these to? Is it suitable? In other words, if they're really high risk and you haven't properly disclosed it, are you selling it to widows and orphans on the street? That's one concept. Is it getting into the right hands or the right purchasers? And then second aspect, are those purchasers aware of all material risks?
Do you think Andrew Cuomo is onto something here, Ron? Do you think that he has a shot at some point being able to really point the finger at some of these brokerage names?
You know what? It seems, from what I've read, and it's really the only information that's out there right now in the marketplace, that the requests are very broad. And so when you have situations where people have lost significant sums of money, which has occurred here, if you spend enough time looking at something, you're probably going to come up with something. Now, whether that something is material or not, that's a whole other issue that I can't answer still at this stage.
Now, you mentioned intent. Were these people who were selling these instruments aware of all the implications? I mean, the best analyst in the world a year ago wasn't saying that all these things would spiral out of control with the mortgage-backed security. So on the face of it, isn't it obvious that nobody was aware of all the risks?
Well, on the face of it, I can't necessarily. It's a hard question to answer, and that's actually a great question. There's two things. I started focusing on the statement you made about intent. I'm not familiar enough with the law to tell you whether intention is required, because there's certain liability that you may be subject to if there's a material omission or intent, meaning they were reckless, they disregarded it, they didn't do enough digging, that the mortgages were flying so fast that time didn't allow for it, and they just packaged them and threw them out to the street. It was buyer beware.
Okay, I'm so glad you brought up the word reckless. I'm going to ask you to switch hats here and pretend that you're defending maybe Bear Stearns or Deutsche Bank or whoever has been targeted here. Is it enough to say we relied on the ratings agencies such as Moody's and S&P for this information? We went upon that, so it's really them you should be looking at, not us. Does that work?
You know, you guys are a great team. You should be on TV together. These are great questions, I'm telling you.
High five, David.
No, you know what? The answer is it's not clear. How much can you rely upon another service provider in the marketplace? And are people that are coming to you because you're a Merrill, a Deutsche Bank, a Bear, or wherever you are, because they expect you to have done some form of diligence as well? I don't think you can necessarily slough it off. If I'm driving a school bus, do I not do my own maintenance check, or it's good enough that I took it to another garage? Will I not have liability? So I think you can't turn a blind eye either.
Understood. Ron Geffner, formerly of the SEC. Great to see you, Ron. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Please come back.
Thanks, David.
Appreciate it.
We tried to question him. We
I
tried
think
to
you're
put
going to
him
keep
on
your
the
jobs.
At least for the day. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
See ya.
Take care.
Well, these latest subpoenas, are they meant to uncover real wrongdoing, or is this a new business witch hunt?
Our Fox panel is here to talk about it. We are joined by Mike Norman from the Economic Contrarian Update, Nicole Ridgway from SmartMoney.com, Yoron Brook from the Ayn Rand Institute, and Peter Schiff, author of Crash Proof. All right, Peter, what do you think? Is there anything to this, and is it appropriate to be subpoenaing these companies at this point?
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course there's something to it, but it's very typical. You remember back in the dot-com bubble during the 1990s when Wall Street was, touting all these internet stocks, and it was obvious to people like me that these companies were worthless, yet, nothing happened until after the bubble burst, and then they paid some fines, they got slapped on the wrist, but ultimately Wall Street made a lot of money promoting those bogus companies. They did the same thing with these mortgages. When I first learned about these securitized mortgages a couple of years ago, and I saw the high credit ratings, I knew they were worthless. I knew it right away. I'm sure they knew the same thing. But, what's going to happen this time when Wall Street got a lot of people to buy the dot-coms? The customers did it with their own money. But this time, Wall Street is much more exposed because they lent people money. They lent their customers money. They financed these transactions. And many of these Wall Street firms, some of them might go bankrupt this time. They're going to have much bigger penalties imposed on them in the market than they are going to get from the government. But I'm sure there's going to be fines. They're going to plead guilty to certain things, and they're going to get slapped on the wrist. But they might have much bigger losses imposed to them in the market because they're on the hook for a lot of these products. Because even though they sold them, they vendor financed them, and it's going to bite them big time.
Explain what you mean by vendor financing quickly, if you can.
Well, it means a lot of the companies, a lot of the hedge funds that bought securitized bonds from the big brokerage firms did it with money that they borrowed from the big brokerage firms.
That's a key
and
point.
The only collateral for these loans are these subprime mortgages themselves that are now worthless.
All right, so it's kind of a pyramid scheme, Mike.
I agree with Peter Schiff.
Really? What?
I just had to throw that in.
Oh,
okay. You want to know something?
I had a heart attack for a second.
Listen to this. I worked for Standard & Poor's in 2000 and 2001. I was essentially fired in 2001 for challenging some of the assumptions on these CDOs when I went to the top analysts and I said, will these withstand a deep economic downturn? Okay, which we haven't even had. Okay, we haven't had a recession. They were like, no, these are stress tested. How could you even think of something like that? Look at what is happening now. I do agree with Peter in the sense that, look, this comes so late. I mean, the horses have left the barn already. Where were these guys? Where was Cuomo? Where was Spitzer prior to these things blowing up? If you really had a concern, if you thought there was excess being built into the marketplace, into the system, you should have been on top of it, scrutinizing it, not after everything comes unglued. And now you risk throwing gasoline on the fire, so to speak, and exacerbating the situation. I think it's terrible.
Nicole, could you say better late than never for Cuomo coming out after these people?
I think so. I mean, Mike might not agree with me, but
I would never disagree with you.
I mean, they should have done their due diligence. They can't blame everything on the credit rating agencies. I do think that we might see subpoenas for the rating agencies too, Moody's and S&P. I mean, look, they're looking for people, not necessarily scapegoats, but some accountability here.
Yoron, I'm sorry to do this. You got 20 seconds, quickly.
This is pure political opportunism by Cuomo, by Bush, and by Clinton, taking advantage of a problem in the market to score political points. The market is penalizing these banks. As Peter said, they're going to suffer huge losses. They made bad decisions. They were stupid. They financed it themselves. How corrupt could they have been if they were financing this stuff themselves?
All right. You did it in 20 seconds. Thanks so much.